This message is brought to you by Alliance Bible Church located in Mequon, Wisconsin. Our vision is to captivate generations with the satisfying gospel of Jesus Christ. For more information about Alliance Bible Church or other resources, please check out our website, myabc.church.
Turn, if you would, to the book of 1 Corinthians. We're going to pick it up where we left off last time. Somebody asked me after the first service, so how much of this book are you going to teach and preach? I said the whole thing. What are you talking about? We don't quit around here, and we don't skip stuff around here. There's no shortcuts. We keep going. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, starting in verse 17. So we're going to pick it up today. I was watching a rerun of an older television sitcom. Now, ordinarily when I do this, I mute the commercials, but on this occasion I decided to watch them just to see what they were telling me. And some of you are thinking, well, what are commercials? I've never heard of those before. Well, the best way to think about commercials is they're like the ads that pop up on YouTube, only with these, you don't get the option to skip them. You're stuck with them. Whatever they may be, you're stuck with them. I know it's primitive, but that's how some of us still live. Anyway, the first commercial that was on was an advertisement for Botox. The second was a plea for tourism sponsored by the state of California. Now, at this point, I'm thinking to myself two things. Number one, those two are clearly related. And second, I'm thinking to myself, what sort of people do they think are watching this television show? And then the third commercial was one for T-Mobile. And, in college, I majored, some of you know this, I majored in music, but I had a business administration minor, which is useless. But I remember my college marketing class. And so what I did, I decided to watch the rest of the commercials, just to see if my suspicions would be proven true, and confirmed they were. Here's what marketing is about. Marketing is about instigating discontentment. That's what marketing is. Marketing is about instigating discontentment. It is all about convincing you you're not satisfied with your face. Okay? That's the Botox. You're not satisfied with your vacation options. You're not happy with your cell phone carrier, right? It's all about instigating discontent. It's about agitating you so you don't stay put. Now, listen, I know some of you work in marketing, and I've just insulted you. Okay, some of this is tongue-in-cheek, and life is complicated and messy. I get all that. All of this still works, though. Carl Truman asks us, how many of us are wearing clothes we bought 10 years ago? How many are using computers we bought 5 years ago? How many of us are driving vehicles more than 15 years old? That would be a fun one. Okay, how many of you are driving vehicles more than 15 years old? Let's do the proud, the few, the proud. Yes, okay. Yeah, less than 10%. All right. Do you ever, here's the question, do you ever, by the way, what is this about? This is the air we breathe, right? It's designed to agitate us and implant in us a desire to go over there, or up there, or under there, anywhere but here. Anywhere but here, right? The world's wired this way. Question, do you ever find yourself exhausted by this? Well, if so, the Apostle Paul has a good word for you today. The word is, remain as you are. Blossom where you're planted. You want another one? All right. Embrace the power of staying put. This text is teaching us roots for restless souls. Very rarely can I summarize an entire sermon with a picture, but I can with this one. Here's the picture. What does it say? Be a tree, not a tumbleweed. Okay? The entire teaching of 1 Corinthians chapter 7, 17 and 24 in one picture. Okay, document this. This may never happen again. Be this, not that. Let me show it to you. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, starting in verse 17. Only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him and to which God has called him. This is my rule in all the churches. Was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? Let him not seek to remove the marks of circumcision. Was anyone at the time of his call uncircumcised? Let him not seek circumcision. For neither circumcision counts for anything nor uncircumcision, but keeping the commandments of God. Each one should remain in the condition in which he was called. Were you a bondservant when called? do not be concerned about it. But if you can gain your freedom, avail yourself of the opportunity. For he who was called in the Lord as a bondservant is a freedman of the Lord. Likewise, he who was free when called is a bondservant of Christ. You were bought with a price. Do not become bondservants of men. So, brothers, in whatever condition each was called, there let him remain with God. So Paul here is giving you permission, ready? He's giving you permission to be content. You want to be content? Paul says, permission granted. Let me show you how we do that. How do we blossom where we're planted? How do we do this? 3 things. Acknowledge your divine appointment, clarify your personal identity, and value our collective diversity. It's okay to be content. How do we get there? Well, acknowledge your divine appointment, clarify your personal identity, and value our collective diversity. First, acknowledge your divine appointment. It's already there in verse 17. Paul says, only let each person lead the life, listen to this, that the Lord has assigned to him and to which God has called him. Now, hold on to that just for a minute. Texts occur within a context. This is coming on the heels of Paul's teaching on marriage, on divorce that we picked up last week. Remember, there were 3 distinct sets of instructions. He encouraged widowers and widows to remain single unless they can't control themselves. He's commanded Christian couples to remain married. He's exhorted Christian spouses married to non-Christian spouses to remain in the marriage. And all of that, the principle is what? It's stay put. Blossom where you're planted. Be a tree, not a tumbleweed. Paul is going to expand the application of that beyond marriage. Now look at this. This word assigned, you saw it in verse 17, right? Lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him. That word is not a small word. It's not a filler word. It's not an afterthought word. It's a meaty word. That's a stake word. That's a thought-provoking word. That's a big word. That's a big word. It means to apportion or deal out. Now, on the one hand, Paul can say your current marital status has been assigned to you by the Lord. But as we'll see, he's going to expound on that. Your ethnicity has been assigned by the Lord. Your socioeconomic class has been assigned by the Lord. Your vocation has been assigned by the Lord. Your geographical setting has been assigned by the Lord. So don't fool yourself into thinking you're in your current station of life because of you, or some impersonal forces that were blowing about the atmosphere. No. That word assigned is so deliberate. It's so intentional. It's so loaded with theological meaning. Let me tell you something. It's got a really, really big God behind it. God is more involved in the details of your life than you think he is. He is way more involved in the details of your life than you think he is. Proverbs 16:9 says, the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Proverbs 19, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. Your station in life, wherever that is, whatever that looks like, is by divine appointment. It's by divine appointment. No matter how rosy or dark it is, it's by divine appointment. In a matter of speaking, we were all in line one day to receive our marching orders from God. And when he handed you that piece of paper, it said everything about your current station in life. Because God is more involved in the details of your life, it is okay to be content. You got that? It's okay to be content. You can be content. Permission granted. The most well-written story in all the Bible, I believe, is the story of Esther. It's an absolute white-knuckling roller coaster story. There is so much in that story that had to go just right for it to turn out the way it did. Here's the gist of it. If Xerxes never throws a party and gets drunk, he never makes a request for his wife Vashti to come and dance for his buddies. If Vashti is never requested, she never refuses the request. If she doesn't refuse the request, she's never deposed as queen. If she's not deposed as queen, there's no beauty contest to determine who takes her place. If there's no beauty contest, Esther never becomes queen. If Esther never becomes queen, then Haman's decree goes forward and the Jews are killed. If Esther doesn't keep secret her nationality of being a Jew, Haman is never removed from his post. If Haman is never removed from his post, Mordecai's killed. If Mordecai's killed, he never becomes a lieutenant in the Persian government. You got all that? So much had to go just right for God's people to be spared. It's remarkable. Additionally, Book of Esther, 10 chapters. God is never mentioned in the book. His name appears nowhere. And that's the point. You'd have to be blind not to see how he's involved. This is called the hidden providence of God. He is very active, even though you don't see it. God is more involved in the details of your life than you think he is. Your station in life is not an accident. It's not plan B. It's not plan C. Your station in life is by divine appointment. One of the reasons Paul says we don't need to be in a rush to change our station in life is because the one you've gotten now has been assigned to you by the Lord. You might have questions about it. You might not be sure how it's going to turn out. But one thing is for sure, you're not there by happenstance. Blossom where you're planted. Be a tree, not a tumbleweed. It's okay. It's okay to be content. Second, we need to clarify our personal identity. Now, Paul uses two illustrations to help us understand what he means when he's saying stay put, or when blossom where you're planted, be a tree, not a tumbleweed. He's going to bring up a couple of examples. One is in verse 18. He says, was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? Let him not seek to remove the marks of circumcision. Was anyone at the time of his call uncircumcised? Let him not seek circumcision. Now, I'm not going to go into all of that, and I'm sure you've got all kinds of questions about that. But at its most basic level, Paul is saying ethnicity is inconsequential for one's value before God. How so? Jewish people were circumcised. Non-Jewish people were not. Circumcision was a big deal in the Old Testament. It's what made a male a Jew. It distinguished them from all other people groups. But through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, circumcision has become, in Paul's words, inconsequential. By saying circumcision isn't important, Paul is saying your ethnicity is not important. There is no spiritual advantage before God to be had by being of one ethnicity and not another. And so if ethnicity is inconsequential, what is important? I'm glad you asked. Verse 19, he answers it. For neither circumcision counts for anything, nor uncircumcision. Okay, that counts for nothing, but keeping the commandments of God. So here Paul returns to the main theme of the book, which is the holiness of God's people. The holiness of God's people. That's what counts. Now, this is important for us because our society continues to be racially charged. Racially charged. So, my fellow Jesus followers, let's remember something. Your ethnic heritage is far less important than your holiness. Your personal identity ought to be rooted most passionately in your spiritual heritage rather than your ethnic heritage. Your interest in keeping the commandments of God ought to overpower your interest in keeping your ethnic traditions. First illustration. Here's the second one, verse 21. Were you a bondservant when called? Do not be concerned about it. But if you can gain your freedom, avail yourself of the opportunity. Now, we need to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. We're talking about slavery. Difficult for us because of our historical context to appreciate what Paul's talking about because we've got the antebellum history of this country in our past, and we automatically go back to that whenever we hear about slaves or slavery. First century, slaves were not distinguishable from free persons by race, speech, or clothing. Slaves came from all walks of life. They were sometimes more highly educated than their owners. and held responsible professional positions. At times, some destitute free people sold themselves into slavery for economic and social advantage. They could reasonably hope to be emancipated after 10 to 20 years of service or by their 30s at the latest. They were not denied the right of public assembly, and they were not socially segregated. They could accumulate savings to buy their freedom, and their natural inferiority was not assumed. The experience of the typical slave in the first century Mediterranean world, Paul's context for writing this passage, was largely different than the experience of a typical slave in this country during the 18th and 19th centuries. So that helps a little bit understand Paul's take. He basically says, if you're a slave, remain a slave. Unless you have an opportunity to get out of it, then do so. That's different than his take on circumcision, right? Paul says, if circumcised, don't undo it. If not circumcised, don't do it. Here it's, if a slave, remain a slave, unless you have an opportunity to get out of it. Still, you'll see the overall thrust of the passage is what? Blossom where you're planted. The power of staying put. Roots for restless souls. Be a tree, not a tumbleweed. Why? Why is Paul trying to drive this home? Here's why. Just like there is no spiritual advantage before the Lord to be one ethnicity rather than another, Paul is saying there is no spiritual advantage before the Lord to be a free person rather than a bondservant. I would imagine some Corinthians were concerned about their status as slaves, that it would make them less effective and less useful as Christians. Perhaps they thought their inherent worth was depreciated because of their social status. Paul is saying, no, your standing before God is not predicated on your social class. Your standing before God is predicated on your relationship to Jesus. Now, let me boil this down. Remember, this passage comes on the heels of Paul's instructions concerning marriage. He does have marriage and singleness in mind when he writes these verses. Our society is no different today. We tend to assign value to people. Let me say that again. We tend to assign value to people based on marital status, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, vocation. We do this. Our society does this. I have talked with single people over the years who at times feel like second-class citizens because they're single. This is why Paul's going here. He's saying, no. You got to clarify your personal identity. He's saying, don't tether your sense of value, worth, identity to any of those external markers. You're not more valuable to God if you're married than if you're single. You're not more valuable to God if you come from some ethnic background. You're not more valuable to God if you're part of the upper middle class. You're not more valuable to God if you're white collar or blue collar worker. We are not more pleasing to God based on the markers of marital status, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, or vocation. This is his point. Where are we to derive our value from? It's in there. The knowledge that God has purchased me for himself through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. You saw that there? You were bought with a price. This is your identity. This is your value. And the other one was that I'm seeking to live a life of holiness that mirrors the life of Christ. These are the two identity-shaping truths that Paul is saying transcend marital status, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, vocation. These two things are where my identity is, where my sense of value and worth come from, what they're tethered to. Do I belong to Christ? And am I living a life that is characterized by his holiness? That's it. That's it. Make sure, Christian, you have tethered your identity, your personal identity to these things, because not doing so can be fatal. Absolutely fatal. Interestingly enough, it was the 19th century philosopher Soren Kierkegaard who illustrated this really well in a parable that he wrote. He writes, "There once was a lily who lived a happy life beside a rippling brook. This beautiful little flower in its simple surroundings was content and carefree until the day when the bird showed up. Now this feathered visitor was a show-off, a braggart and teller of tales. It would swoop in and fill the lily's head full of stories of better places and far more beautiful flowers. Each story was crafted to convey the message that in comparison to other flowers and other places, this poor lily was a nobody, a failed lily, captive to simplicity, embarrassingly inadequate. Following each visit from the bird, the lily fretted more. It couldn't sleep. It no longer woke up happy. It felt incapacitated by not enoughness. The beautiful little flower, once content, now realized in comparison with others out there in the whole world, it was ugly, deficient, incarcerated to its familiar surroundings. But the bird was there to help. The bird had the answer. So together they formulated a plan. Early one morning, the bird landed beside the lily and began pecking away at the soil around its roots. Now liberated, the lily was placed under the wings of the bird, and away they flew to the better place. In that better place where lilies were more beautiful, where life was fuller, the flower told itself it would truly be a lily worthy of the name. But alas, they never made it. High in the heavens, rootless and finally free of its former constraints, the lily withered and the lily died. If you tether your value to some other external marker the world around you is saying you have to have or you've got to be like, and you try to go for it, what do you think is going to happen? It's death. It's death. The promise can never deliver. Blossom where you're planted. Realize the power of staying put. Remain as you are. Be a tree, not a tumbleweed. The gospel of salvation by grace through faith in Jesus Christ does not prefer one social, economic, ethnic, racial, or cultural category over another. These things are way down the list. At the top, do I belong to Christ? Am I living a life that's characterized by his holiness? That's what matters. Clarify your personal identity. Third, value our collective diversity. Now, I want you to imagine, let's do a thought experiment. Imagine what would happen to the church if all of those external markers out there had to change in order for people to become Christians or to be part of the church. So let's say only married people can be Christians. All the single people, you got to go get married in order to be part of the church. Or only white people can be Christians, right? Or only six-figure salary earners can be part of the church. Anybody who makes less than that, you got to go get another job. Keep working. Or only white-collar workers can be part of the church. What would happen if that's how we approach life as a church? Think about how homogeneous the church would become. We'd all look like each other. We'd all live like each other. Here's the power of blossom where you're planted. The power of staying put. Roots for restless souls. Be a tree, not a tumbleweed. Here's the power. Let me say it this way. Staying put in your station in life guarantees that those on the outside will look through the windows into the Christian faith and see a space not occupied by people of the same color, status, and pay grade. You got the picture in your head? But they're going to see a startlingly diverse community of various ethnicities, languages, and classes. That's the picture. On the outside, people are going to look through the windows of faith. They're going to see the church, and they're going to say, wow, they come from all walks of life. What's up with that? Where else do you find that? Now, let me expound upon this because there's a lot of chatter about diversity out there as well today. I want to be very clear about this. Diversity is not a virtue in and of itself. It's not something we shoot for as a church. Here's why. Hell is going to be an incredibly diverse place. So you cannot say that it is itself a virtue. Notice, and you can see it in the text, diversity is a byproduct of getting the gospel right. when we see that one's value before God is not predicated on marital status, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, or vocation, but rather your value is rooted in belonging to Christ and living a life of holiness, then everything else becomes secondary at best. In other words, let me put this differently. The gospel makes us tolerant of numerous external markers. The gospel makes us tolerant of numerous external markers. Because of the gospel, married, single, doesn't matter. Because of the gospel, white, black, doesn't matter. Because of the gospel, $100,000 a year, $10,000 a year, doesn't matter. Because of the gospel, physician, janitor, doesn't matter. The gospel ought to make us indifferent to numerous external markers the society around us cherishes. And let me tell you something, church. We can be a breath of fresh air here big time. Big time. I know you. Some of you work in environments where you're weighed and measured constantly according to those external markers. You get weighed, you get measured by those external markers constantly. And it's exhausting. That ought not happen in the church. In the gathered church, it's about two things. Are you joined to Christ? And are you living for his glory? That's it. You know, this was noticed by early outside observers of Christianity. There is a little known letter that was written in the 2nd century. It's called the Epistle of Diognetus. And the writer, in writing this, was making some observations about Christians. Outside observer to Christianity, making observations about Christians. Let me read it to you. This is what he said. Observing Christians, 2nd century. Christians are indistinguishable from other men either by nationality, language, or customs. Notice this is sticking out probably to a Roman. This is a little strange, a little different than the way the rest of the culture works. Christians are indistinguishable from other men either by nationality, language, or customs. They do not inhabit separate cities of their own or speak a strange dialect or follow some outlandish way of life. And yet there is something extraordinary about their lives. They live in their own countries as though they were only passing through. They play their full role as citizens, but labor under all the disabilities of aliens. Any country can be their homeland, but for them, their homeland, wherever it may be, is a foreign country. Like others, they marry and have children, but do not expose them. They share their meals, but not their wives. They live in poverty, but enrich many. They are totally destitute, but possess an abundance of everything. What's the writer doing? The writer's observing how diverse the early Christians were. They didn't cluster around ethnicity. They didn't cluster around language. They didn't cluster around customs. They didn't cluster around hobbies, marital status, sports affiliations, or anything else. So there's room for Viking fans in the kingdom, people. Why? Why did they cluster around these things? Because the gospel made them indifferent to numerous external markers the culture around them valued. And what happened? Rodney Stark, in his book, The Rise of Christianity, been a classic for years. And in writing about this, he said, this is one of the things that led to the explosion of the church in the 2nd century. People from the outside looking in were saying, look at this. We don't have to be that. We don't have to be that. We don't have to be this. All this pressure, this weight that's put on us, we don't have to have that when we're part of this community. More and more people came to faith in Christ. More and more people became part of the church because they realized they don't get weighed and measured by these external markers. Because of the gospel, married, single, doesn't matter. Because of the gospel, white, black, doesn't matter. Because of the gospel, $100,000 a year, $10,000 a year, doesn't matter. Because of the gospel, physician, janitor, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The gospel makes us tolerant of numerous external markers. And Paul is saying this is a good thing. Remain as you are. Blossom where you're planted. Be a tree, not a tumbleweed. In other words, he's saying, you know what, church? it's okay to be content. It's okay to be content. Let's pray. And in our society, God, it's fast-paced. And so many of us in this room live under this weight. We constantly feel weighed and measured, having to live up to these arbitrary external standards, these external markers. And because we're told this over and over and over again, we've tethered our identity to those things. So we thank you again for your word to us, which has wonderfully clarified some things for us, and hopefully for some of us corrected our thinking. That our value, our worth ultimately is not on marital status, it's not on ethnicity, it is not on socioeconomic class, it's not vocation or 1,000 other external markers that are often so arbitrarily put up. Rather, our identity, our worth, our value is tethered to Jesus, what he's done for us and what he's called us into. So I pray that you'd strip away all these other distractions that vie for our attention and allow us with wholehearted devotion to fixate on where our worth, our value, our identity is truly rooted. And that is the person of Jesus Christ. I pray that he would be our treasure. More than anything else, make him our treasure. We ask this for his glory and our good. Amen.